My parents drained every dollar I'd saved for 10 years on my birthday. No warning, no apology, just a silent notification flashing across my phone, $2,300,000 withdrawn. While I stood at the pharmacy counter in my gray uniform, the world tilted and something inside me snapped. They thought I'd cry. They thought I'd beg. Instead, I smiled, finished the prescription in my hand, and clocked out without a word. Because what they didn't know was that I'd built the perfect trap for this exact moment. Every form, every signature, every dollar, they'd just signed their own downfall. Before I tell you how I turned their greed into their undoing hit-like, and tell me, have you ever been betrayed by your own family? I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. White siding, trimmed hedges, a flag that my dad raised every morning like clockwork. Neighbors waved, thinking we were the kind of family that had Sunday dinners and inside jokes. What they didn't see was how quiet it was once the door closed. No laughter, just the hum of the refrigerator and my mother's voice calculating what I owed her next. When I was 21, fresh out of community college, I landed my first real job at a pharmacy on Burnside Street. I remember bringing home my first paycheck proud that I'd finally earned something on my own. My mom, Elaine, didn't even look at me. She just said, "You'll put 70% into the family fund. We all contribute." My dad, Martin, nodded like it was law. That's how it started. Every dollar I earned turned into theirs. They said it was for the house for emergencies, but nothing ever changed. The roof still leaked every winter, yet my sister Haley got a new laptop, new clothes, and weekend trips with friends. I told myself I didn't mind that maybe one day they'd appreciate how hard I worked. But by 24, when my salary increased and my contribution jumped to 80%, the truth settled, and this wasn't family sharing. It was control disguised as love. I lived off instant noodles and hand-me-downs, wearing the same gray shoes until the soles peeled. Haley never worked a day in her life yet. She complained about how tiring med school applications were. Every time she bragged about tuition being handled, I looked at my mother and saw that faint smirk, like she was proud of her little investment paying off. Still, I tried to be the good daughter. I helped with bills, mowed the lawn, fixed the car, and told myself that someday they'd see me differently. But I was never the daughter they bragged about. That was always Haley, the future doctor. I was the one who handled everyone's problems quietly, the daughter who stayed invisible. Then, one rainy Sunday afternoon, I found out just how invisible I really was. I had stopped by my parents' house to drop off groceries when Aunt Rachel mentioned something that froze me mid-step. She said casually, "Elaine told me Haley's last 2 years of tuition will be covered. You must feel relieved." I asked. "Covered by what?" She blinked. "Your savings, of course. Elaine said you'd do anything for family." I remember the smell of burnt toast in the kitchen, the sound of rain against the window, and the way my mother's voice carried from the next room, light, confident, as if this was already decided. That day, something inside me changed. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just smiled and helped Aunt Rachel carry the groceries in. But from that moment, every step I took was deliberate. Every password, every account, every fake bank statement I left lying around became part of a plan. It would take 3 years, but when my 31st birthday came, so would their reckoning. For 3 years, I lived like a ghost in my own life. I worked 2 jobs, weekday shifts at the pharmacy weekend bookkeeping for a clinic downtown without telling anyone. Every dollar went somewhere only I knew. To my parents, I was still the obedient daughter handing over family contributions. To me, I was building the wall that would finally separate my life from theirs. I remember how my mother used to drop by the pharmacy just to check on me. She'd smile in front of my coworkers, then lean close and whisper, "Don't forget, rent's due next week. Your sister needs books, too." Her perfume always lingered after she left something sharp and floral that made me nauseous. Every time she said "your sister," I felt my chest tighten. Haley didn't even know what those books cost. She only knew they magically appeared. I started noticing the pattern. They'd ask for money right after my raises, right after bonuses. My mother always knew before I even told her. It wasn't until I cleaned their attic one weekend and stumbled on a locked box that I found the reason. Inside were copies of my bank statements, tax documents, even my Social Security card things they'd kept for safekeeping since I was a teenager. The edges of the papers were yellow, but the feeling was fresh rage. I realized they weren't just controlling me, they were tracking me, watching every deposit, every transaction. My life wasn't mine. That night, sitting in my car outside their house, I opened a new account at an online-only bank using a friend's mailing address. No branches, no paper mail, no trace. That became my real savings. The account they knew about, the one they could see, became the bait. For the next 2 years, I crafted a story they'd believe. I made small transfers between my visible and hidden accounts to keep the illusion alive. I even printed fake statements now and then, left them on the dining table like crumbs for them to follow. Every time I mentioned my dream of buying a house someday, my mom's eyes flickered. I wanted her to. Meanwhile, Haley started her first year in med school, funded entirely by what they called family effort. I called it my exhaustion. She'd call me from her dorm complaining about long lectures, and I'd listen pretending to care, staring at the calendar on my wall 3 years until I turned 31. By the time the countdown reached its final month, I knew them better than they knew themselves. My father liked precision, so I left everything perfect on paper. Balances, names, signatures, all neat enough to tempt him. My mother liked to feel clever, so I let her find what she thought was a secret. I could tell the tension in our house had shifted. They spoke about me in front of me now like I wasn't even there. "She's been saving a lot," my mother said once, sipping her tea. "It's good she trusts us." My father nodded, smiling behind his newspaper. I smiled too, because the next time they opened my account, they wouldn't just find money, they'd find their own downfall. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, June 10th, my 31st birthday. The air inside the pharmacy smelled like disinfectant and cheap coffee. I was halfway through explaining dosage instructions to a man picking up heart medication when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Normally, I'd ignore it. But something about the vibration, it didn't stop. I glanced at the screen. Withdrawal, $2,300,000 successfully processed. For a moment, everything blurred. The fluorescent lights, the chatter, the soft beep of the register, all of it faded. I could hear my own breathing, quick and shallow like someone else's. My fingers went numb around the pill bottle. "Ma'am, are you okay?" the man asked. I wasn't. Not yet. But I would be. I clocked out without a word. My coworker, Julian, called after me, but his voice drowned under the roaring in my ears. Outside, the sky was the color of wet cement. I walked straight to the bus stop, phone clutched in my hand like evidence of a murder. Every stop felt endless. I refreshed the banking app again and again, watching the number 0 stare back at me. 10 years. 10 years of overtime shifts, skipped vacations, and second jobs gone in one click. By the time I reached my parents' driveway, the rain had started. Their house looked exactly the same, neat, smug, ordinary. The kind of place that hides sin behind white curtains. I pushed open the door without knocking. My mother sat at the table scrolling through her phone. My father was reading the newspaper, his glasses low on his nose. Neither of them looked surprised to see me. "Where's my money?" My voice cracked halfway through the question. My father folded his newspaper slowly, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "You should thank us," he said. "It's going to Haley's tuition. You can always make more money, Nora. She only has one chance at this." My mother smiled, calm and poisonous. "Sweetheart, you were never good at managing large amounts. This way it benefits the family." I laughed. It came out sharp and wrong. For a second, they both froze, watching me as if I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had 10 years of patience, had finally snapped. "Did you take it from the wrong account?" I asked, still laughing. My father's expression faltered. "What are you talking about?" I pulled my phone from my pocket, swiped to the bank app, and turned the screen toward them. "That account. The one you just emptied? It's not real. It's a bait account. The money was never there." My mother's hand dropped her phone. It hit the tile and cracked. My father's face drained of color. "I filed a police report an hour ago," I said quietly. Forgery, identity theft, grand larceny. They have everything: signatures, security footage, timestamps. You forged my name, remember?" My mother's voice shook. "You can't do this to your own family." "I didn't," I said. "You did." For the first time in my life, they looked small. Two people who thought they could play God and got caught in their own game. I turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. "You have until noon tomorrow to return every cent," I said. After that, I let the district attorney handle it. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window in my apartment, listening to the rain hit the glass, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and gray. My phone stayed silent, but I knew the storm was coming. At 11:47 the next morning, it rang. My father's voice was shaking. "The money's back," he whispered. I checked the app. The Bait account was full again. I didn't answer him. I just hung up and called my lawyer, Rebecca Lang. 2 hours later, Detective Sean Vega and his partner knocked on my parents' door with a warrant. The neighbors came outside. The world saw who they really were. When I pulled up to their street later that day, 2 patrol cars were already parked in front of the house. Red and blue lights painted the white siding like a warning sign. I sat there for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, feeling the hum of the engine under my palms. My stomach twisted, not from guilt, but from the weight of 10 years collapsing all at once. I stepped out just as the front door opened. Detective Vega stood at the porch, his notepad tucked into his jacket pocket. Behind him, my father and mother were sitting on the couch, both pale and shaking. Ms. Bennett Vega said, nodding politely, "We've got everything we need. Signatures, camera footage, matching timestamps. They'll be booked this afternoon." My mother looked up at me, then mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Nora, please." "We didn't mean," don't I said. My voice was calm. "You meant every bit of it." My father tried to speak, but the officer beside him tightened the cuffs. The sound of metal snapping around his wrists was soft but final. As they were led outside, the neighbors began to gather Mrs. Larkin from across the street, the Hendersons next door. Curtains moved. Phones came out. The perfect family on Maplewood Drive suddenly exposed. My mother turned her face toward me, voice cracking. "You'll regret this one day. Blood is blood." I met her eyes. "Then maybe you should have acted like it." The officers guided them into separate cars. My father didn't fight it, just looked straight ahead, jaw-clenched eyes fixed on nothing. For the first time, he didn't look powerful. He looked afraid. Haley showed up 20 minutes later, still wearing her med school jacket, the same one I'd unknowingly paid for. She ran up the driveway, face blotchy mascara smeared from crying. "What did you do?" she shouted. "They were just trying to help me. You've always been jealous," I cut her off. Jealous of being robbed, of being used. I stepped closer until we were eye to eye. "They broke the law, Haley. You can dress it in family values all you want, it's still theft." She flinched her mouth, opening and closing like she was searching for something to say, but there was nothing left to defend. The officers drove away, leaving silence behind. The street smelled like wet asphalt and shame. I stood there until the last flashing light disappeared around the corner. Rebecca walked over from her car, her heels clicking against the pavement. "It's done," she said softly. "They'll face multiple charges. You'll get an official notice within the week." I nodded, but my chest didn't feel light. Just steady, like the air after a storm. That night, I returned to my apartment and opened the blinds. For the first time, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. No more family fund, no more manipulation dressed as love. Just silence and the kind that heals, not suffocates. Over the next few weeks, the headlines hit the local papers: Portland couple charged in forgery and identity theft. Their photos were everywhere, my mother's tight smile, my father's dead stare. Haley dropped out of med school after her tuition was revoked. 3 months later, I bought a house. Not big, not fancy, but mine. A small colonial-style home near the lake where the morning air smells like pine and coffee, not guilt. I signed the deed in my new name, Nora Reeves, and paid cash. On moving day, I stood barefoot in the empty living room, sunlight cutting through the blinds' dust, drifting like gold flakes. The silence didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt earned. I thought of everything I'd given up the years, the sleep, the blind loyalty, and realized none of it was wasted. It led here. I donated the $2.3 million they'd returned to a scholarship fund for students without family support. I didn't need their money. I needed closure. Sometimes people ask if I ever miss them. I don't. What I miss is the version of myself who kept believing that love meant obedience. She deserved better, and now finally she got it. 3 months after the arrests, Portland felt like a new city. Or maybe it was me. I still walked to the pharmacy every morning out of habit, but the air felt lighter. Nobody was calling me at dawn asking for help with bills or reminding me to send more for Haley's tuition. My phone was quiet, my paycheck untouched. For the first time, everything I earned stayed mine. The news died down slowly. At first, every customer who came into the pharmacy recognized me. Some whispered. Others offered sympathy disguised as gossip. I just smiled, scanned their prescriptions, and wished them a good day. I didn't owe anyone my side of the story. The truth had already been written across the front page. Elaine and Martin pleaded guilty. The court seized their savings and ordered restitution. They lost the house, the car, even the timeshare in Arizona they used to brag about. When I drove by Maplewood Drive months later, the for sale sign was tilted, half sunk into the lawn. Someone had ripped off the last name from the mailbox. Haley tried calling once. I didn't answer. Later, I saw her name pop up in a news brief working at a clinic upstate, not as a doctor, but as an assistant. Maybe she's learning what work feels like. Maybe not. I don't care either way. Rebecca and I met for coffee one afternoon at a small shop near the lake. She smiled when she saw me. "You look different," she said. "I feel different," I told her. I had just signed the paperwork for the Bennett Fund, a scholarship in my parents' old name. It would cover tuition for students from low-income families, kids who didn't have anyone fighting for them. Turning that stolen number, $2.3 million, into something good felt like closing a loop. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was release. Sometimes at night, I sit on my back porch with a blanket and a cup of tea, watching the reflection of the moon ripple over the water. The silence no longer feels like a punishment. It's peace, the kind that comes when you finally stop explaining yourself to people who never listened. I think back to the girl I was at 21, the one handing her first paycheck to her mother smiling because she thought love meant sacrifice. If I could tell her anything now, I'd say this: you can love your family and still protect yourself. You can forgive them and still walk away. The night before Thanksgiving, I got a card in the mail with no return address. Inside, it just said, "We're sorry." The handwriting looked like my mother's. I stared at it for a long time, then folded it back into the envelope and tossed it into the fireplace. The flames caught fast, curling the edges into ash. Some things don't deserve to be kept as memories. The next morning, I baked a pie, my first one in years, and took it to the clinic where I worked. Julian grinned when he saw me. "You're actually celebrating this year." "Yeah," I said, laughing softly. "For once I am." As we shared slices with the rest of the staff, I realized this was what real family felt like. No strings, no guilt, just kindness freely given. Freedom didn't come from the money or the revenge or even the justice. It came from finally owning my life without apology. Every morning now starts the same way, quiet, steady mine. I make coffee in my kitchen, open the window, and let the air roll in off the lake. It smells like pine and clean rain, nothing like the old house with its constant tension and perfume thick enough to choke on. Sometimes I catch myself reaching for my phone, expecting a text from my mother, reminding me to be grateful, or my father forwarding another bill. But it never comes. Just the calm hum of my own space, the kind that doesn't demand anything back. People always ask if it was worth it turning in my own parents. I don't have a simple answer. Justice rarely feels clean. It's messy, and it costs something you can't get back. But what they took from me wasn't money. It was freedom. And getting that back, owning it fully, is the greatest revenge there is. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted, most hear me. You're not weak for walking away. You're strong for choosing peace over guilt. You don't have to let someone else write the story of your life. If this story hit close to home, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Have you ever had to cut ties with family to protect yourself? I want to hear your story. It reminds others they're not alone. And if you believe that freedom is the sweetest revenge hit, that like button, share this story, and subscribe for more. Because sometimes the best way to get even is to build a life so good the people who broke you no longer matter.